happy Thursday to everyone on the phone. I'm the Director of Strategic Analytics for the Hackett Group, and we'll be hosting today's WebEx that is entitled Improving or Improve Your Customer's Journey. For background, I've been a part of the Hackett team for just over a year. However, I've been in the analytics and data industry for the last 20 years, aligned to many industries that are relative to some of the participants I see on the call today, which would include retail, CPG, manufacturing, life sciences, and so forth. So today we're going to talk about some concepts on how to improve your customer's journey. And just for the definition of customer journey, I consider customer journey to be an analytics framework, typically empowered by big data technologies, that enables you as an organization or as a marketer to understand your client or customer's experience, either from their perspective or from your perspective, so that you can better understand and interact with those customers, and they can interact with your brand and overall better enhance that experience that they have with your brand. So we'll talk about sort of where that roadmap begins. And really, I always tell my clients that I believe that every lead is created equal. The reason is every customer or client that you have started out at some point in the history of your relationship as a target, somebody else, somebody that you haven't met. And as that relationship starts to grow and starts to develop into something, whether your marketing team is working them as a marketing qualified lead, whether they're just somebody who's discovered your brand, you continue to learn more about them. And as you learn more about them, they become what I'll say is a suspect, right? You're beginning to get some awareness and credibility with that particular suspect. And as that continues to grow, in many cases, that person becomes a prospect, or in retail terms, a shopper. Some people will also consider this to be a consumer. But the bottom line is that you've established some trust at a level in which they're engaging more often with you. So just like other human relationships, that trust allows them to feel good about the experience and how they work with you. And then when they become a client or a customer or a buyer, they've had some kind of a transaction with you and your organization in a way that you've exchanged monetary values for goods and services. And so today, what we're going to discuss is how to look at that framework, how to understand some of the applications that can help you, and to understand what's sort of getting in the way of many people's journeys in analytics and how they're making data work for them. And we know that because of the change in the world, right, we've created a lot more data. Software and technology has continued to graduate to more complexities. We know that we're sort of at a crossroads today of where certain organizations have been very, very successful, and it seems like others have either had a harder time or in some cases have completely failed. And so that truth is scary. And I believe that we live in a world of frightful givens. And so more organizations are focusing in on trying to fix this situation, but a lot of them really don't plan for it. And in my opinion, not having a plan, not having a written agreement or a strategy is really the road to disaster. And I'll explain why I say that. So when you reach those crossroads, I see a lot of organizations do one of two things, right? They either go down the path of exploring technology without a real purpose or an outcome in mind, or they follow the road to best practices. And I think Sun Tzu said it best when he said, tactics without strategy is really just a noise before defeat. But also, strategy without tactics is the long road to success, right? You need to have a balance of both. And so what has happened in many cases with the pursuit of creating analytics that support customer journey is that people really do take that bumpy back road. And I've given them some funny names, but really I've seen everyone say to me, well, we have skunkworks projects that we do the stuff in the big data space, or, you know, it's kind of a pet project that's held within our analytics group, or we're doing a use case POC, or, you know, we're exploring software that allows us to get to analytics. Well, all of those are really just component steps of an ultimate outcome, which is to create a better relationship with your customers so that they can have more engagement with your brand, and ultimately you can either get them to participate in your products or sell them more. So Hackett has created what I'll say is the true velocity to customer journey analytics. And this program that we've been hosting over the last couple of months, entitled Velocity to Value, takes a proof of concept methodology and underpins that methodology with some planning best practices. And that allows you to do those smaller projects, low risk, high value engagements, but with scale in mind. So the 4 points that I've discussed in those other conversations have been, number one, make sure that you have a measurable fiscal financial goal. So a simple one would be, we need to close 10% more sales by the end of this year, or I need to find 5% in supply chain savings. Those kinds of things, right? Have a financial goal, a quantifiable goal with an end date. Then create very clear, attainable objectives with defined dates, right? That allows you to then bake out certain tasks that you're going to give your team. I've said that you have to hire a smart and confident team, somebody that's going to push through those walls of change and be diligent about your program, and then find data variety, other data sources, likely from outside of your organization, many times inside your own organization, but outside your organization in the IoT, which is also what we call the Internet of Things. And that variety of data, you've heard the 3 V's of big data, velocity, volume, and variety. That variety allows you to build context to the conversation. It allows you to learn more about who or what you're dealing with. So to take those basics, we head into what I like to call the analytics tornado. And this is really, in my opinion, sort of what's happening in the real world out there every day. And I see a lot of customer journey programs are playing what I'll say is akin to Where's Waldo with their data. And I don't know if you've done this recently, but Waldo is actually a pretty tough thing to do. I have 8 children, almost 8 children in my home, and I've not done this recently, and I was doing this with my 3-year-old daughter, and I really was amazed at how long it actually took me to find Waldo. The first thing I had to do is actually look up to see what Waldo looks like. But on this poster, and that's the picture of it, this poster, Waldo resides somewhere in all of that color and all those images. And the reason I like that sort of idea is because I feel like a lot of organizations are doing this exact thing with their customer journey. They're looking at all of this information and they're feeling confused as to what's really happening in the world today and with their customers. And so they're playing that Where's Waldo, and they want to serve them better, but they can't find them. So I wanted to give you a few seconds to look around, and maybe you still haven't found Waldo, so I'll help you out by zeroing in, right? And this is what we do with analytics. We try to zero in and make the invisible visible. So if you haven't found him yet, he's actually right there in the middle next to the weird guy in the blue in the painting. It really, really is one of the harder Where's Waldo posters that exist. So we've developed a methodology that I've heard my clients tell me helps them to make it rain with insights. And that methodology is based on something we call the R5 engine. And actually the reason I call it the R5 engine is simply because I got tired of saying the word right with every, part of this conversation. But the engine is fueled by things like past promotional responses, right? Understanding what your customers or your shoppers or your buyers, what they've responded to in the past is part of the algorithm. Geolocation, so the where in the equation, right? As far as we know right now, everything happens somewhere on the face of planet Earth. Even if it's in cyberspace, that buyer is in a physical location using a third-dimensional computer to access things that they're going to buy or learn from your brand. So where is always important. Personalization, or some marketers like to call it persona, is the concept of understanding how people fall into groups. So if you've heard the birds of a feather flock together conversation, it's about making your tone and messaging of marketing or the channel in which you deliver that media with that message personal to that person. And a lot of organizations are still sort of struggling with this part of it, but it is getting better. And the next is around products and services. Well, of course, your supply chain provides products, or your organization provides human labor in the form of services, or perhaps online. And those are important to understand in this entire scope of insights. What is it that people like to buy? Why do they buy it? Where do they buy it? What's the price point in which they want to be served that particular product? And then, of course, the sales channel. So, the easy one to think of, for example, is retail. You can buy something in a store, or I can buy it online. I can order it over the phone. What sales channels or what marketing channels are best attributable to how those products are being sold, and what's important to understand about how that channel is delivering that value. So the R5 engine has this right promo responses, right place, right time, right people, right channel. And it's empowered by what I'll say is logic. But we all know that humans make decisions. They make their buying decisions using emotion. The human brain operates on emotions and feelings and then justifies those decisions and those feelings with logic. And the decision to buy something is made subconsciously, and those subconscious decisions are based on empirical mental processing that follows a logic of its own. Now, without getting into too much detail, I'll tell you that leading brands are using what I'll say is emotional intelligence today to really understand why people make those decisions. However, simply said, there are logical steps in the buying process that is really what is factual data that you can actually use to mine today. And we'll talk about some of those things. The important part with any project to be successful, right, especially in today's environment where costs are reduced or expenses are reduced and there's just not enough time. That's sort of the thought process that a lot of people bring to the table. You really got to get there quickly, and you want to keep the momentum with how you're achieving those analytics. So one of the things I'll suggest in putting together your customer journey program is really be ready to determine all of the relevant touch points that your customer or your shopper comes in contact with in your brand. Use regression modeling to begin with. So look at a past set of experiences and a past timeline, and make sure that you have enough data variety that helps to drive that context. And then try to do an A/B variant as early as you can. So if you're not familiar with A/B variant, it's taking two scenarios in a control group and treating the message or the channel or the offer in two different ways to see which one wins. And then you continue to tree that out to say if B1, then there's B1 and B2. B2 wins, and then there's offers. And then what I'll say is when you share this with your executive teams or the people that are sponsoring your project, essentially the ones that are putting the check forward to make sure that you can do this, always have as much visual zeal with your visualizations. In some cases, I've even done some meetings where I've actually gotten up and I've taken and hand-drawn the actual graphs, right, sort of artistically with different color markers on a whiteboard. And the reason is that people recognize that you're putting that kind of effort and faith into something and that you're also willing to humanize that conversation, although it does take time and a lot of practice. The other thing I'll say is to make sure that you set up your plan so that you fail very fast. This way, if you're having troubles with the team or the data or the analytics, that very quickly you can find a way to get out of that situation or find what's gone wrong with it. So what I'll say is make sure that you properly diagnose your primary business challenges, and I like to call those challenges what I call the 4 C's. And those 4 C's are cognitive challenges, right? Do you have the right skills, the right data, the right capacity of people to do what they need to do? Are you coordinating that technology or those processes or setting up enough time for those things to work together? So the easiest way to think of coordinative challenges is you visit a friend's home and you've got an iPhone and they're an Android household. They may not have a turbo cord to charge your phone. It's just simply you don't have the right stuff. So coordinating sometimes can be even the simplest of things, right? Are you having a cooperative problem? Maybe you have the cognitive skills and the capacity and the data and the technology, and they're all integrated, but perhaps the politics or the policies or the compensation structures in your organization is what's getting in the way of progress. And then the fourth, which is really one of the more important things that you'll want to do early on, is do you have the budget or the sponsors or the approvals needed to take and consider the cost of operating the right analytics, right? So if you've got the money and you've got the other things that you need to have, you should be successful. But build it so that you can recognize what they are and fail fast so that you don't waste time. So here's 3 applications that I'd like to share with you that we've built out for clients. And I call these our SMART analytical apps. SMART is an acronym that you've heard in many ways, but I have a different meaning for SMART. And the reason is that I think that all analytical applications today should really follow sort of these four things, right? They need to be scalable. They need to be mobile device ready. And those analytics should be real time, meaning they're relevant to the time that I need to make the decision, and they should be trusted, because there's no reason to make any of this stuff if people that are viewing it and using it to make decisions, the decision scientists that you have don't trust the data. So one of those applications is what I'll talk to is what I call promotion coupon to cash. So it's kind of measuring the promotion, which one is winning, and the path to getting to when it becomes cash. Then there's another application in which I'll call the customer empathy map. And that really just talks to understanding the thought process, the behaviors, and the engagement steps of your customer, your shoppers, or your buyers. And then there's the touch point timeline, right? You can have promotions, you can have buying paths and products, you can understand the customer, but then there's the time dimension, the timeline in which they're engaging with your organization. So one of those sample applications, and again, this one's mobile optimized, takes a look at store transaction analytics. And it breaks things up by top 10 products. It looks like sales, by day. Which of the promotions, perhaps for your back-to-school promotion, is working effectively? What's the scale of those promotions? How's that working? Where's it working? And this is really a beginning to the understanding of that prescriptive analytics that then leads to the further predictive analytics that everybody wants to get to. And the reason that big data is so important is because big data allows you to see more correlations, and those correlations lead you into a place where you can start to predict the future. So again, this is an analytical application on a tablet, and it can be handed out to, say, store managers or field people, and that's why having it mobile optimized is a really smart idea. The next would be a customer empathy map. And a customer empathy map looks at a variety of different things. In this example, I have the onboarding experience. And in this particular example, it looks at the value chain, right? So how does that process happen? How does somebody who's a target in marketing become a lead, and then a suspect and a prospect or a shopper and a client? And who are the stakeholders and who's involved in that? Something very good to do is to understand that value chain. And then you can look at personalization, or what they'll also call proto-personas. So it's a need to understand demographics and pain points, motivations, and behaviors of your particular customers. And the reason that's important is you can break up your advertising and your marketing and your sales team's interactions to be specific to the types of folks that you're selling to. The next would be to look at a larger experience map, right? So this is different than the other two. This is how someone becomes aware of a brand or aware of an offering. They sign up and they maybe perhaps start to learn who you are, and you build trust with them. And then you initiate that conversation, and you can collaborate with them on different things. So in social media, we see a lot of very successful companies looking for how to continue to run those activities, to find correlations, to make assessments of those outcomes, and to continue to better that experience so that customers can share that peer-to-peer interaction. I don't know if you guys are familiar, but the Dollar Shave Club just sold for $1 billion. And I was watching their Facebook ads, and I was just really amazed on how they took shaving, which is a necessity for their buyer's audience or buying audience, and made it something more special than just going to the store and buying a handful of razors. They made it a monthly commitment in this whole thing, and it was really great. So I really give whoever created that kudos to creating such a great brand. And then, of course, to host what I'll say are, the barriers to consumption, right? So brainstorm on the session to understand, do our customers know how to buy what we want to sell them? Is there a process that really allows them to understand that? What are the situations and inspirations that they're coming across? And I always suggest to my clients to do this, if you can, in a live room where you can make sticky notes, put it on a board, and really have those discussions and be open and honest. So that empathy map is one application. Another one would be sort of that timeline. So in this customer journey example, you see an onboarding journey. So this is left to right. What you don't see on the bottom is the actual timeline. But before that, once you've played the Where's Waldo game and you have a couple of personas that you really want to see and understand, you can take that journey with them to see, why is it that they seem to attrite at this certain place? And maybe that's where we're seeing churn, or there's opportunities to upsell when they're, on our website activating a card, or when they interface to the call center. Perhaps after that conversation, we can send them a mobile experience survey and get them to sort of remind us what we did right and wrong at that time. So again, the timeline really allows you to understand what's happening and spend the money in the right places to further your customer journey. And it's all empowered with analytics. So I'll talk a little bit more about how you can begin your customer journey, and perhaps you're already down this path, or perhaps you're just beginning. One thing that is very, very important is to really, and I always tell this to my clients, understand if everyone that you're working with internally understands what a customer journey really is. So I'll define that for you. And again, this presentation will be available after the webinar. Customer journey is defined as a couple of different things to different people, but it has a couple of these bullets probably relative to your business. An event that marks a defining experience in the life cycle of your client or your customer. It can be defined around a discrete beginning and end across a time dimension, right? So we know that, for example, maybe customers come to us for 3 years and they change as their life events and the stages of their life continue to mature. It's typically a multi-touch, multi-channel, cross-functional process, right? And so there's a lot of things to consider, but it's really not that much. Depending on the level of complexity of your business model, it should be measurable. And if it's not, then it's one of the things you're going to want to look at. Could we create simplicity? And it should be anchored in how customers think about you or think about it, and not the way your internal functional silos do, right? Look at it from your customer's perspective. And journeys are sort of increasingly the way that people who buy interact with your brands. One of the recent statistics that I saw was that 56% of all customer interactions happen during a multi-event, multi-channel journey, right? So we created all these things like mobile devices and websites and pick up at the store and all of those things. And so more than half of the experiences are happening in more than one channel. So you've got to be able to build for that other half or for that half. 38% of all customer journeys involve more than one channel of interaction, right? So the buying channels have increased. We've done that to make things available to more people in more ways, but then we have to make sure that we understand and measure so that we can manage all of those different channels. And then I'll say that customer journey should, for your organization, represent an evolution in thinking or a paradigm shift in thinking over the traditional touch points or moment approaches. So, you hear a lot about customer 360. What I see fail with a lot of customer 360 analytics is that it doesn't look at the time dimension of the entire journey. It looks like at a particular event in time. And so there are ways to sort of broaden out that timeline and allow you to see a lot more. What I'll say is you should also use evidence to prove your point. Bringing in key drivers in, for example, sales forecasting will allow you to start to look at how you can really understand what's happening. So in this particular example, lost just a little bit of the screen there. We've done some evidence-based prediction for finance. And what we're seeing is that correlation analysis helps to sort of narrow the list of drivers and KPIs, and that our clients are then sort of reducing those down to the ones that are the most important and refining those methods to a handful of things that really work. What that allows you to do is use those drivers to prove that there are opportunities in the customer life cycle and in that marketing funnel. And what I'll say is you can do that in short engagements. I see a lot of organizations go into these projects at 6 months to a year at times, and it's a lot of weight. A lot of times because there wasn't an appropriate blueprint or a plan up front. Again, so road mapping is very important, and planning for these things can really help you to save in the back end. So those key drivers in forecasting, for example, in finance can be very crucial. What I'll say also is that you should create an incrementality, right? Get something to what I'll call reduction of the ridiculous. Look at the increments and start to focus in on the smaller pieces. So you want to create a combination of journey mapping with things like behavior analysis, channel opportunity understanding, if you want to apply more advanced algorithms. But what you really do want to see is the end-to-end journey. You want to be able to look at it as a whole at some point and understand what's happening so that you could help to predict what needs to happen in the future to better your brand. So for every individual customer, if we think of that sort of Where's Waldo, create best product recommendations for those personas. Find offers that are relevant to that person's preferences. And if you can, understand what's not in their shopping list today so that you're incenting them to have those additional basket items of what the future shopping list should look like. And then design a path where there can be frequent repeat purchases. So you've seen what Amazon has done with those order buttons, right? The one that I found funny, my wife was laughing about, is that they actually make one for Red Bull for 24-ounce cases. So when I reach my last bit of caffeine, I can hit a button, and within a day's time through Amazon Prime, I can actually have Red Bull show up at my door. That's a pretty dangerous thing, but very smart for Amazon. And then make sure that your marketing promotions are triggered by what I'll say are real-time offers, right? Having the offer at the wrong time has a lot to do when that person's going to use it. Recurring promotions or one-off scheduled promotions can be fed sort of into that machine, and that's where that A/B variant testing becomes very important. So again, create that sort of incrementality in your customer journey, and you'll see more success. One other thing I'll tell you to be very aware of is to know where your optimal incentive attribution spend is at. So that sounds very complicated. What does it mean? An optimum stopping model is really how many incentives do we need to send to a particular target or prospect, and how much should we be spending on that before we start wasting our money, right? Well, the fact is that some of those sales that you're counting today are cannibalized from other channels. And it can really, if you're doing it the right way, it can really help you to understand the economics significantly and what degree of cannibalism is actually happening. So, for example, what you might do is spend a lot of money on media and marketing in a particular area and then realize that even if you stopped that particular ad program, that your sales wouldn't change. And the reason is perhaps maybe because your store location was good enough that you didn't need to spend any more money on marketing. You were going to get those sales regardless. So this is where big data practices really, really help because they can capture years of experiences by all of your channels and help you to look at timelines that give regression analytics the context that you really need for relevance. And I'll say this is where promotional persistence and can be analyzed. So one of the other things to be cognizant of is you can send too many promotions, right? You can offer too many cards, and that spend per customer eventually can start to get sort of erosive. Right? So I actually built out this graph as part of an attribution model that we did, and the point in this is you can actually see over fiscal years, looking at a particular group of customers, that there was actually coupons and promotions that were being sent that sort of hit a peak in where they were effective. So you see in 2012 and 2013, email and social and online advertising were sort of competing for that same customer. And then the ones that really sort of dropped off because maybe it was overdone in this particular case was measurable. But then we saw that the online promotions continued to drive more business, whereas email promotions started to lose its affinity. So what I'll say is, really try to work on understanding how those cross-promotional things are working and find as much savings as you can because then you can allot that spend in a different way. And with this process, I'll say, remember to refine, rinse and repeat and recognize where those wins are and to continue focusing in on what really works for your customer journey. At this time, I'd like to take a moment and open up the call for Q&A and answer any questions that anyone may have. I think I need to do that. Our moderator.
Please ask any questions using the chat or Q&A feature on the right-hand side of the screen.
pause my sharing right here. Do you have any other questions? Any questions? Susan, I'm not seeing them on the Q&A.
Okay.
Perhaps I've done such a good job that there are no questions. All right. Well, I hope that everyone who's attended this session has found value in it. And if you want to engage with the Hackett Group and the Big Data team to help you to outline and define your customer journey, we'd be happy to help you. You'll be getting a copy of this presentation as follow-up in an email from us, and we look forward to helping you with your customer journey and being able to build that business and help you to be successful. So again, my name is Chuck McMurray. Thank you so much for joining us today.